On AM Talk this morning, we're discussing issues of energy. How can we alternatively make provisions for other energy supplies? And as a country, what should be the strategic direction that we need to take to make sure that there are no future shortfalls and we have perhaps a lot more medium and long-term plans to improve on the current supply needs of the country? We have in the studio the Executive Director for the Kumasi Institute of Technology and Environment. Well, basically, they're just known by the acronym KITE. I have in the studio Ishmael Ajikumhene. Thank you for joining me. It's been a while. Now,
thank you, Roland.
Let's look at the current state of assessment of the current energy needs of the country. What really are the numbers and what are they?
Well, I don't know which numbers you knew about because they really haven't changed. Because essentially we have the two old hydro dams, Acquah and Bui, giving us close to 1,200 megawatts. And then now we have Bui, but I'm sure you're also aware that Bui doesn't run 24 hours because we're still trying to build a lake. So Bui comes on normally in the evenings, and sometimes they run only one unit. So if there are 400 units, we get about 110 units. That is about 1,200. You add the thermal plant. So close to about 2,000 megawatts installed capacity. But I'm not too sure they are available capacity because sometimes you do have some of the plants down and sometimes you don't have gas and things like that. So 2,000 megawatts installed. And you look at the peak load, which is the highest demand in a day, which a couple of weeks ago, I don't have my numbers, but a couple of weeks ago was around 1,900 megawatts. So we're really operating on the margins, and we don't even have a reserve margin, which is why the moment any of the plants go down, we have to be shedding load.
And looking at the current state of the scheduling based on the demand, which sectors tend to take more? Is it just, if we want to categorize it, consumers, industry, etc.?
It's the residential consumers, and that's the sad part, because then you have over 50% of the demand being taken up by the residential sector. And the industries we know are not doing too well in this country, and their contribution to GDP hasn't been encouraging over the years. And the biggest demand tends to be lighting loads in the evening. So that's one of the things that informed the need to change over the incandescent bulbs to CFLs, because the survey had shown that at 6 p.m. when everybody's light comes on, the lighting load was huge. The next thing was room air conditioners. So they also have a program in place to ensure. But basically the residential sector is consuming the highest amount of power that we have at every point in time, especially with the closure of the VACO, or VACO maybe operating one port line. We do have the residential sector dominating.
If we have to do a critical analysis of the current state of our energy needs, once we have residential consumers taking part of the chunk during peak hours or peak periods, it means that there is available markets. We have the customers who are paying. Are we getting that type of phenomenon where customers are paying?
No, and that's another problem.
Why?
Well, first and foremost, about 30% of the electricity we produce go into losses.
Meaning?
So we have technical and non-technical losses.
Okay.
The technical losses are the ones that you lose through transmission and distribution. Okay. As you transmit and distribute power,
some that will be cut.
You lose some. Okay, those are the technical losses.
Those are normal.
They are normal.
They happen all the time.
Yes, but it could be controlled. It could be reduced significantly. If we improve on the conductors and things like that, and also have some other smart grid systems in place. But the non-technical losses are the commercial losses, thefts, meter tampering, and non-payment of bills.
Are those huge?
Significant. I mean, the technical losses, if the losses is around 30%, about 20% of that is the non-technical losses, and people not paying their bills, ECG not able to collect as they are expected to collect. And you have all these commercial establishments bypassing their meters, and you have people who have air conditioners in their homes, but it doesn't pass through the meter. You know.
Really?
Oh yes. I mean, I won't talk much about it so that people will become interested.
But then why don't you have the institution that's supposed to be in charge, the ECG, the Electricity Company of Ghana, at the forefront, trying to cut down on these consumer losses, so to speak?
Roland, the problem here is that ECG has a whole unit called loss control unit or something like that. Their work is to go around trying to detect some of these illegal connections. And
then if they do, why do we have these difficulties still being
Well,
recorded?
the problem is systemic, and some of these things are deep-seated, and places like Sodom and Gomorrah, it's full of illegal connections, but they dare not go into those communities. They cannot. But in terms of proportions and the magnitude of the losses, you don't want to be focusing on those places, because the big guys are the hotels and those institutions who collude sometimes with the same ECG officials to sometimes do this meter tampering and bypass. I mean, I have been in my house, or my wife was in the house when somebody came and said, look, your bills are going up, we can do something about it. And then my wife said, you don't know the person's whose house you are in, because the next time you realize you'll be arrested. So it's a whole systemic thing, but you said they needed to control part of the technical losses, for example, as a result of obsolete equipment. You know, some of the conductors that we have, the distribution networks are so old that you tend to lose more power through the transmission and distribution, and those require a lot of money to be able to replace some of those conductors, and also the transformers that are overloaded and are very, very obsolete. So yeah, they seem to know the problem, but it requires a lot of money to be able to fix that. What they don't need money to fix will be the ability to cut down some of these non-technical losses, which will have to do with the collection of revenues. And PRC actually has a benchmark for them that they probably have to collect about 95% every year, every month, and things like that. But they have a challenge doing that and hitting those numbers.
In trying to get to the apex of trying to make sure that, well, you reduce all illegal connections, and so you reduce losses and collect what you have to collect from consumers, what has been some of the difficulties that the utility companies have been facing in that direction?
It's been an age-long problem, lack of investment, which is also linked to the fact that historically tariffs have been quite low in terms of...
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
But we're always told that tariffs are increasing and consumers are complaining.
Yes, because they are increasing not in real terms. You know, they are nominal terms. When you have, for example, if you look at it carefully, even the tariffs that were approved in October, okay, if you look at the rate at which the city is depreciating, so in real terms, you find out that maybe things are not increasing. And if they really have to, I can show you graphs of the nominal increases, which shows upward, but when you look at the real increases, that's when you index the tariffs to dollar, you realize that they're actually declining in some cases because of the rate at which the city is depreciating. So I think it's part of the reason why the government decided to undertake or undergo the power sector reform. But unfortunately, we weren't able to take the bold decisions that we needed to take. I mean, tariffs ought to be at their economic levels, and that would mean something like this automatic adjustment formula that they've introduced, which I don't think is fair, because it is the right policy because of the way the city is depreciating, but it's also not fair because consumers don't have any control over how the economy is managed, which influence how the dollar behaves or misbehaves. So yes, there's a need for the utilities to be recapitalized as quickly as possible. Whether or not they will be allowed to collect enough, or they will be able to generate enough money to do the capitalization themselves, I'm not too sure. But what I'm sure of is the fact that over the period of time. The problem we have today didn't start today. It started so many years ago when we didn't take most of the decisions that we needed to take. We knew when the power plants ought to come online at every point in time. There was a master plan, there was a strategic national energy plan, which we never stuck to. So basically, the utilities don't have the wherewithal to be able to carry out the necessary investments.
Okay, well, we're talking utilities this morning. We have on the line the communication manager for Ghana Water Company, Stanley Mate. We know that they want to undertake some refurbishments or some works on the Pong treatment plant, and as a result of that, sections of Acquah would not be getting water. Would want him to give us those areas, clarify why they have to introduce these new measures. A very good morning to you, Mr. Mate. Which areas will be most affected? And then in what form is it going to be? Is it rationing, or there will be total water shortages within the period? Good morning, Mr. Mate.
Hello, good morning.
Yes, which areas, as a result of the closure of the Pond water treatment plant, will be affected in Accra, as you have announced early on?
Yes, the whole of the eastern and then the central part of Accra will be affected, and including areas on the Kapim Bridge. So all the villages along the Kapim Mountains will also be affected. On all those villages are being served by, or all those towns and villages are being served by the Pond treatment plant. So it will affect all of them. So we can mention Acquah, Kapim, Nifam, and Home. We can mention Edukum, Mountfree, Ebri, and all those villages. We can also mention Michelle Camp, the whole of the Tema community, the industrial area, from Brown, Bone area, and then Teshin, Nwa, La, Osu, Cantonment, Naponi, 37 area, and on all those areas will be affected. Every area served by the Pond treatment plant, including Medina, Adenta, Asalebuche, Hacho, Dome, and all these areas will also be affected.
What's happening at the treatment plant?
Sorry?
What's happening at the treatment plant that you can supply?
Okay, we have been informing the general public of ongoing projects that is supposed to improve the situation within Greater Accra region. So there are several projects ongoing. Now, it's gotten to a point where we need to do some interconnections at the Pond treatment plant, and for one project to be completed within the next 2 to 3 months. So that interconnection will be done. But if you look at the volumes of water and the pressures in the pipeline, okay, there's no way we can do that job without shutting down the plant. So we have had to shut down the plant to enable us do that job and have it completed. The contractors gave us 4 days, but our management have met with them, and they have impressed on them to do all they can to work assiduously to finish the job ahead of schedule. Now, what will happen is that they may have to work throughout the night, one shift, and work throughout the night and throughout the period, so that instead of 3 days, we should be able to finish within 3 or 3.5 days.
The question for many residents, especially in Adenta and some of those areas that you usually don't get supply at all, is why do you include them in the whole announcement?
No, if anybody says Adenta doesn't get water at all, it's a false information. Adenta gets water, except that it's not adequate. It's not adequate. So their expectation is that whilst you are rationing water, they should be able to store some water over the period. It is not true that Adenta doesn't get water at all. Adenta gets water, but it is not adequate. We acknowledge that, and we are working around the clock to make sure that come the end of this year, we should have enough water in the system. Now, if you look at we have a new treatment plant being built. When that project is completed, there will be more water through Adenta into Okonglu. So there will be a lot of water in the system by the end of the year. So for now, there's water, but it's not adequate. And we expect that whilst the water is flowing, it will store some water so that the impact of the shutdown will not be felt. Thank you.
So, alternatively, when is supply going to come back on stream? When are we envisaging that some of these areas will get their normal supplies?
That by Wednesday the job will be completed, but the contractor said Thursday. But because of the new arrangements that our management have had with them, we are hoping that they will finish ahead of schedule, so that the moment the job is completed, where supply should begin. So hopefully by the weekend, we should be able to start production to charge all our lines and for water to get to everybody. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Communications Manager for Ghana Water Company, Stalimati, talking to us there about the ongoing water shortages that communities are likely to face in, he said, East and Central Accra, he said, just because they are having some rehabilitation works at the Pong Waterhead Works treatment plant, and we'll see how that goes. And these all dovetails into issues of utility that we are discussing this morning. We still have in the studio, though, Ishmael Ajekumhene. He's Executive Director for the Kumasi Institute of Technology and Environment. They are just known by the short acronym KITE. And we're discussing how alternatively we can improve revenue collection. Do you have a feeling, having done your observations and studies and research, etc., within the sector, that the commitment is there from the companies?
You mean the utilities?
Yes.
Well, the utilities don't have a choice. The only problem is that it's increasingly difficult for them to collect all the revenue that they probably could collect. But that was the whole rationale behind the introduction of the prepaid meters, in which case you buy the electricity up front, so the onus is on you to go back yourself to get the credits and load them onto your metering system. So that's the whole idea behind it, and that is helping improve revenue collection significantly. The only problem is that the prepaid meters too have their own challenges, that sometimes especially the new ones that they've introduced quite recently, where the system will not work, and then you may have to wait till the Monday before you get somebody to come and fix it. Beyond that, the ones that is a theft thing, the stealing of electricity, that is very difficult to control, and they will have to intensify their monitoring and their surveillance and all the things that they need to do, and put in place incentives for people to come and report such incidents and things like that. I know there is a reward system in ECG for the people who are able to cause the arrest of some of these people, because they are causing a lot of financial loss to the company.
If we'll have to look at it in a more cost-effective manner, which one is the best alternative? Due to the current losses they are having, they improve on reducing those losses among the consumer population, or perhaps they make sure there's a drive to get everybody metered, because still you're saying that we still have illegal connections.
In fact, everybody who is referred to as ECG customer is metered. When ECG talks about a customer, they are not talking about an individual. They're talking about a meter. ECG's customers are those who have meters in their house. So a customer could be a household of about 10 people, but because they have one meter, that's an ECG customer. So as far as the official statistics are concerned, every customer should have a meter. But what happens in those houses or in those businesses with the meter, as I said, if the meter is tampered and if it's bypassed, where once you don't have the power consumed going through the meters, it means that you are going to record a lower reading, and it's going to affect how much money is billed and how much money is collected. So Yes, they should focus on reducing non-technical losses as well as technical losses, and there are a number of measures they themselves have been implementing and trying to meet those revenue collection targets. As I said, it's one of the benchmarks that PURC has set for them, so they have to work towards that. And really, if they haven't met those revenue collection targets, it has an impact on how much the PURC is prepared to approve for them when they submit tariff increase.
Okay, we'll talk about consumer concerns with quality of supplies, and this one I know transcends not only energy but also into areas of water supply, etc. Since the 1990s, or the early part of the 90s, the need for getting alternative sources was heightened. We've gone into thermal, and now we feel that thermal perhaps is the best we can have. That is, if there's consistent supply. What other alternatives realistically can we ideally also resort to? I mean, looking at our state as a country.
Well, in terms of the options, I'm sure they are very well known, very well documented. We used to have, as you rightly said, we used to have hydro, and which is deemed renewable in the sense that you have the water, which, depending on the range that you have a fuel, which is the water that goes through the turbines and produce electricity. And then we chose to go the thermal way as a thermal complementation, which is fossil fuel based generation. So you have the conventional and non-conventional. The alternatives, as we've all been talking about, I'm sure people are thinking about the renewables. And yes, I am an advocate for renewables. I have promoted renewables, but the truth of the matter is that the unit cost of producing from renewables is still very high compared to conventional sources. Let me give you a very good example. You know, the VRA has just injected about 2 megawatts of solar PV into the grid in their solar project in the north. The 2 megawatts is costing the VRA about $8 million. Okay.
That's the cost of the project.
The cost of project commissioning, I mean construction, installation, everything commissioning.
Supplying to how many communities?
It's fed into the grid. Okay. So it's a grid connected system.
And what percentage of power is that? Or
2 megawatts.
Only 2 megawatts?
Yes. So that gives you a sense of how much money we're talking about, not to talk about the space, the land area you need to install the panels to be able to generate the 2 megawatts. So the renewables, they are becoming increasingly competitive. Wind, for example, can hold its own against some of the conventional systems. So yes, we can always talk about the renewables, but looking at the deficit that we have and the constraints that we have, the renewables are not going to be the solution for the short to the medium term. I am a firm believer in the need for us to get more thermal plants, run gas-fired thermal plants, because they are the cheapest in the range, and they are also
gas-fired thermal
plants. Not the light crude ones they are a little bit expensive to run because of the fuel.
But we have a gas thermal plant.
We do have, but we don't have a reliable supply of the gas. So even though we had a firm agreement with Nigeria and the West African Gas Pipeline project, it's turned out to be very, very unreliable. And we are getting gas as and when they feel like giving us gas, and there's always a reason why they won't give us gas. Unfortunately, we seem to be overhyping the gas project in Acquah, and the reason. And
you are saying that.
Yes, in terms of.
That's not the in thing for us.
Yes,
it's
because
not going to resolve.
At least not for now, because if you look at the projected supply from the gas project, it's basically going to reduce, at best, replace the fuel that is being used at Abwazi. Abwazi is 330 megawatts. The two plants combined, we have the simple cycle plant, which is, and then we have the combined cycle plant. The two put together, 660. What they are targeting now, the gas is going to replace the light crude. So in terms of additional supply of gas, we're going to have to still rely on on the West African gas pipeline. Not until we make new gas discoveries and then we're feeding them through the gas processing plant. We shouldn't expect anything magical to happen with the coming into being of the gas processing plant, because if the gas is mainly meant for the Takoradi thermal plants, there are only 2 Takoradi thermal plants. There's a T3 which is not working, but we shouldn't expect too much from that. So basically it's only going to reduce cost a bit. That's if it's going to even translate into end user tariff. So I believe, and let me use this opportunity, I'm not for things like nuclear, I'm not for things like the coal-fired plants. I'm not even going to go into the environmental issues, but if you look at the levelized cost of producing electricity, the levelized cost is how much it's going to cost you to run a power plant over the life of the project.
Okay.
So that's the basis of comparison two technologies at every point in time. And I don't know what numbers the ministry, and with the greatest respect to my friends in the ministry, I'm not too sure even the economics are as cheaper or as cheap as we are being made to understand. Coal-fired plants, even without the clean coal technologies they are talking about, is still more expensive like the gas, combined cycle gas plant.
So you're saying no matter what the alternatives that we're thinking of that are even around, they're equally very expensive?
Renewables are expensive.
Okay.
And even though the prices are coming down,
Not yet.
Yes, especially for solar PV.
Around the world, we haven't gotten there yet.
No.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and for solar PV, for example, the feed-in tariff that PURT has approved for solar PV systems in Ghana here is 41 pesos per kilowatt hour. 41 Ghana pesos per kilowatt hour. Even that one, the private investors are complaining that it's not high enough. But if you're looking at 41 Ghana pesos compared to what we're paying around 2022 Ghana pesos, it means that if we were to have a lot of solar in the system, it almost means like doubling of the end user tariff. And that's one of the reasons why PRC is controlling how much of the renewables will go into the energy mix. So the renewables, they have a role to play, but it's going to be something like waiting for them to make a lot of economic sense. People are not putting any premium on the environment, so I'm not going to talk about the environmental implications of, because if we were to we have the true cost of producing the energy, then it makes a lot of
take into consideration
because those are the externalities that is actually costing us
sustainability and the renewable initiatives.
Exactly.
Now, I have consistently been hearing about plants that are also likely to come on stream, like the prototypes we have in Asogli, etc. We call them independent power producers.
Yeah.
In trying to strike those agreements and try to use them as alternatives also, and us not looking at the environmental side, they seem to be like the best alternatives we have right now, because we will have access to the crude than trying to wait on the gas.
Oh, Asogli, incidentally, Asogli...
Not necessarily Asogli, because we have other ones that are...
Okay, there are at the moment, there are only, let's say 2-3 IPPs, because it used to be, Tigo used to be an IPP, which is a joint IPP between CMS, Michigan, and the Volta River Authority, which they sold to TACA at the moment. But Asogli, incidentally, is run solely on gas. So without gas from West African gas, that's why they are shut down. And then we have Senate Power, which is also 110, is owned by Senate, and is the next IPP. The IPPs obviously is the way forward, because government doesn't have the money to invest in the thing. So the real thing is that we need to encourage them to come in. And this issue about tariff, and the main problem, the way the IPPs will tell you, is the presence of what they call a credible off-taker. When you say a credible off-taker, who buys the power if I produce?
Yeah.
At the moment, ECG appears to be the only bulk purchaser of electricity in this country. So Asogli has signed a PPA with ECG. Senate Power has signed a PPA with ECG. So ECG is supposed to take the power from
so you're saying there's likely to be a saturation of the market?
No, not really. I mean, the thing is that
I thought we need a lot more. The demand is high.
We need what we call credible off-takers. Asogli says that via ECG is owing them. Senate will tell you that they haven't been paid over as quickly as they expected. So if ECG is our only hope as a credible off-taker, then not many people will come in and build their plans because they need to.
What's the alternative then?
The alternative really is for us to get into a situation, and we've talked about this thing before. You know, the mines and some of these bulk consumers are not signing this contract with the IPPs.
I deliberately asked that question because
Okay.
I've heard you and I have had a number of discussions on this very subject as well. And I remember even Valco came in during that very discussion. Right now, we have at least the mining companies and with their own generational mix that they have put together, about 80 megawatts, we're being told. If that is the alternative we feel that we can adopt, having the bulk consumers, and we're talking about the mining sector, and now we're having offshoot of oil, and many of them will be using high consumption of energy or power. How do we make them alternatives to only having ECG as off-takers?
Okay, Roland, it will interest you to know that the mine reserve plant, the 80 megawatt that they brought in, they've given it to VRA.
Right.
It's almost like VRA should run. It's almost like it's a dash to VRA.
Okay.
Why? Because it was running on diesel. The plant itself was an old technology they brought in, so it was way too expensive to operate the mine reserve plant. So that tells you exactly what the issue is. So they are no longer running the plant. It was an emergency plan they brought in the heat of the power crisis.
Yeah, that was back in...
You ask VRA, they've given it to them almost
2007,
like a dash because it's so expensive to run. But they wouldn't have done that if they didn't have an alternative. Which is they have contracts with VRA. And VRA can supply them power
directly
at a rate lower than what if they were to pay, if they were to generate. And the tricky thing about VRA, and I normally don't want to talk about it, is the fact that, because they still have a large hydro component, which is generating at relatively 3 cents per kilowatt hour, because the plants were built a long time ago, they are able to have a blend, a tariff mix, where they can offer some tariff to these mining companies, which is cheaper than what a new IPP who is coming in to build that plant. So there's been recommendations that we should take the hydro entirely out of the equation, so that
is for the
if
big
VRA
consumers.
Yes, if VRA doesn't
I'm
have,
talking mainly of the mining companies right
yes, then the mining companies can come and negotiate. For example, if I'm building an IPP, a brand new maybe thermal plant,
then solely for them.
Yes, I have a contract with maybe Anglo Gold Ashanti to say that, look, I can deliver this at 15 cents per kilowatt hour. There will be no VRA for them to compare my cost with. Once PRC approve the rate and they are prepared to do that, we'll be able to crack this off-taker thing. But so long as they are able to go into the deregulated market and have bilateral contracts with VRA, even though the new policy says that you can't have new bilateral contract with VRA, which is based on hydro. But incidentally, VRA still has that, and they're able to do that, and they're able to give people tariffs.
All these advocacy that you keep talking about in the media, and I'm sure you may have enumerated this on other fora. Why do you think it has become crucial that we now don't put in the mix hydro, and perhaps we give it to the residential consumers or wherever, and then we bring on stream perhaps as a new policy direction, because also it is inherent in the law, the IPPs, for the bigger consumers?
Incidentally, you see, you can't even give the more expensive technologies to the industrial consumers. Because
then it's not an alternative then?
Yes, because you see, elsewhere
it means we're still going to have a mix.
Yeah, elsewhere it's only in Ghana. and most African countries where residential consumers are actually being subsidized by industrial consumers. It's the other way around. So residential consumers in the States and in Europe, they pay more than industrial consumers. Why? Because they are using...
You mean they pay more than the hotels, etc. will pay?
Not the hotels, but we're talking about manufacturing concerns.
Okay.
So if you want to put the mines, for example, into that bracket, that's how come, for example, even when we were in the heat of the crisis, you can't say that VALCO should be running on maybe the most expensive technology. So the real thing, Roland, the way I see it, is we have to delink. What I'm saying is that if it's possible for us to take the hydro out of or price the hydro at the margin, and say that if for example, the least cost option within the generation mix could be gotten only at 12 cents or 15 cents per kilowatt hour, you price the hydro at the margin, so that in terms of competition, I'm able to say that this IPP is offering me something close to what VRA is going to give to me if I enter into a direct agreement with them, so that we create that market. At the moment, we don't have the market for the IPPs to come in. There are a lot of IPPs who are knocking on our doors. People have raised issues about tariffs, but I don't think the IPPs have an issue with tariffs. The IPPs are able to get the PURC will approve a tariff that is equal to the cost of generating the power.
Well, we do understand that, but if you're an IPP and interested or prospective, well, you should be worried if consumers are not paying the right prices or the right rates, and the supply company can't get the retrievals, and so if the receivables are not good enough, then I know that I'm not going to.
Rona, every IPP signs what we call a power purchase agreement.
Definitely.
With the off-taker. They don't care whether you collect your money or not. The only problem is that your receivables could delay. But ultimately, there's a binding agreement enforceable in law. Do you know that sometimes ECG collects, all the money they collect go to VRA, and sometimes they have nothing to run? Because
we've been told that severally.
Yes, there is a standing order in some cases. So the money goes into the accounts, it goes straight to ECG. So the generators don't have much of a problem in collecting their monies as the distributors have, because they have to, whatever they get is taken by whoever is giving them the bulk supply, and then they are left with very little to feed on. Okay. So what I'm saying is that for the IPPs, once you manage to sign your power purchase agreement, you need not worry, even though there could be challenges in the receiver.
Now let's put a wrap to our discussions, and perhaps I'm sure in the next 8 minutes we can make a headway. Now let's put some timelines to what we're talking here. With all this advocacy that you keep making all the time, what are we looking at in terms of what is a medium to long term strategy or plan towards it in resolving the current difficulties we keep having all the time? Because each year we seem to be in a conundrum.
Unfortunately, our problem, there are no quick fixes to our problems now, so we have to go.
Medium long time, right?
Yes.
That's the planning.
Yes.
So do we have it?
Oh, there is a strategic national energy plan which is currently being reviewed by the Energy Commission.
Will it be enforced? Will it be implemented?
That's the bottom line. It has to be implemented. But roughly it takes like minimum 18 months to 24 months to build a new power plant. Thermal, even if it's coal, even if the nuclear they are talking about, nuclear takes like 60 months from contracting and everything to producing a new nuclear plant, even if that's the way we have to go. So really, if you look at the deficits that we have, we have to start from today. If we are not, in fact, next year, if God is not kind to us this year, next year we're going to have a serious power crisis.
Why?
Because the inflows into the lake, Acquah wasn't good last year. And the water levels, as of now, comparatively to what it ought to be, is not good enough. So if you don't have good rain, it will affect next year. This year we can manage, but next year we have to be managing.
You're a doomsday conspirator.
Not a doomsday conspirator, but somebody who is trying to sound the warning that let's be careful, and if we don't have enough rains this year, next year will be tough.
What does it mean for the consumers? Because those watching will be interested in how that could translate or influence whatever they buy from ECG.
consumers, we have to be energy efficient ourselves. And we've heard VRA talking about they're going to embark on a campaign to let people immediately begin to think about...
That phrase, energy efficient, what does it mean?
It's using less energy for the same output. So, for example, if my refrigerator consumes, let's say, 10 units of power, 10 kilowatts of power, the current refrigerator I have is consuming, let's say, 10 kilowatts of electricity every day. If I get a more efficient refrigerator, it can do like half of that.
Yeah, but what does it mean? I have bought credits or I have bought units. I'm paying you, so I use what I think I have bought.
No, you use it, but it's in your own interest. It means you consume less, and we don't need more power. Let me give you a typical example. When we replace the CFLs, the incandescent bulbs, okay, those Acquah bulbs, the one we used to call Acquah bulbs,
yeah,
with the CFLs.
The pottery farm bulbs.
With the CFLs.
That's the neon bulbs?
Yes. You know, we saved about 130 megawatts of peak power. So that would have been at the cost of like 6 million or so, or 33 million US dollars that we used to import the bulbs. We were able to avoid the cost of building a new thermal plant, which would have cost us something like 200, 300 million US dollars. And it wouldn't have gotten that within a short period. So energy efficiency is the big thing, going forward. That's how come the Energy Commission is into this refrigeration, room air conditioning. It's very, very important, and we need to become efficient.
Now, do you think that perhaps our taste of as consumers could also have some negative repercussions on all these efforts of making sure that consumers use alternative sources or perhaps are efficient in their energy consumption? Because these days, everybody's having air conditioning installed in their houses.
But they're efficient air conditioners.
Okay. You have air conditioning in your house?
No, I don't.
Why?
Oh, I don't have it in my house because...
If the thing is efficient, why don't you have it?
Well, it's going to add to my energy bill, and I can do with a fan. You know,
yeah.
But I have air conditioner in my office. You see, the problem is that it makes a lot of economic sense for you to switch over. So when you go in to buy any electrical appliance, there are labels that shows you the efficiency level.
Okay.
If it's a 3-star, it means a 5-star refrigerator with a 5-star label on it is more efficient than a refrigerator with a 3-star label.
Okay, so the one with 2-star here, that one is...
Yeah, so...
It's not good, crap.
Yeah, but the 1-star is equally more efficient than an air conditioner without any label.
Okay.
So the Energy Commission will tell you don't buy any
without any star at all.
Yes. So the higher the higher the number of stars, the more efficient, and it's in our own interest to do that. If you get a refrigerator that consumes, let's say, 100 kilowatts for a whole year compared to one that consumes like 500 kilowatts. You just multiply by the unit cost and you see how much money you're saving. So the Energy Commission has a promo at the moment. There's a project, refrigeration project, that if you hand in your old inefficient refrigerator, okay, you get a discount on a new refrigerator, and you get a loan from EcoBank to buy a brand new refrigerator, which is going to help reduce.
Supposing I don't want loan, I want the money.
If you want the money, then go look for your money and buy it. But at the end of the day, the thing about energy efficiency is that it's a win-win situation. At the end of the day, you win, everybody wins, you have money in your pocket, and nobody is complaining. But there are
bureaucracies in trying to make sure that issues of carbon credits and some of those things are...
You know, as I sat here, I haven't even talked about carbon credit, even though I'm a firm believer in that, I promote that. But you see, I want us to just look at what we can handle ourselves before we go. The carbon credit takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to be able to assess that. If we're able to get that, that becomes a bonus. But energy efficiency, my brother, it makes a lot of sense for the economy, for the individual, and for everything that we're talking about.
Okay.
Let's strive to be energy efficient.
So next year, no problem, no wahala?
We are not doing anything. We haven't done anything to arrest the problem. That's why we still have load shedding. And I'm telling you, if any of the plants go down now, we shed load. Any of the plants that we have, if pond should go down, 160 megawatts, that's a gap. We don't have any reserve margin. So please, And if any of the thermal plants even go down for regular routine maintenance, we have to shed load. And we haven't built those plants to replace them. Renewables can't fix the problem within the short. So let's look at solving the problem in the medium to the long term. VRA says we need to add more capacity. The most realistic option I see is to build new thermal plants. That's my belief. Gas is an issue, but we can have LNGs, which is liquefied natural gas plants. We will bring the natural gas frozen, and we'll come and regasify them and use them in our thermal plants. It's the cheapest around in terms of the options that we have. I don't believe in coal. I don't believe in nuclear. Ghana, we can't even manage garbage. We don't have to bring any nuclear.
We're talking nuclear.
Yes, and that's what I would.
Okay, so thank you and thanks for passing through. Ishmael Ejekumhene, Executive Director for the Kumasi Institute of Technology and Environment. Thanks for passing through, and we hope to have you sometime to help us go through our discussions on energy. Predicting that if we don't do anything to arrest the current situation due to the low rainfall levels or patterns we're witnessing, we're likely supposed to do some extreme load shedding next year. Well, so that'll be it for AM Talk.